Over the course of the past month or so at eWaste, I have been getting a lot of monitors, TVs, all sorts of things. I haven't been finding as many computers lately, which is kind of weird, but the winds have shifted, and now for some reason I'm finding lots of monitors. And so there's monitors here, monitors there, monitors in the car, monitors everywhere. I need to be able to test them and see if they're working. So today in this video, we're going to be talking about testing monitors with this device here. It's an Extron VTG-200. I'll show you how this works and we'll start the testing process. I don't know if I'll get through all the monitors, but we'll give it the old college try. That's coming up right now on Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Well, hey there everybody, my name's Aaron. Welcome back to Retro Hack Shack After Hours, my second channel, and I'm doing this with one eye. If you want to know more about that, I did a post over on the main channel, Retro Hack Shack, and you can learn about some of the medical issues I'm dealing with. So you will forgive me hopefully, if things are out of focus, or if the video isn't quite as detailed as it could be, just because well, go watch that video and you'll see what I'm dealing with. Normally, I tell you what I paid for these monitors at the end of the video, but in this case, since this may well go to a couple this may be a part one of 2 videos where I do all this testing, I'll just tell you up front, most of those monitors cost $5 at eWaste, and a few of them cost $15 because I got them at a different eWaste place that charges more. And hopefully many of them are just working. If they're not, I'll queue them up for a repair video later. We'll just have to see. But first, let's talk about how we're going to be testing these monitors and TVs and everything else that I've found. Let's go ahead and talk about this. It's the Extron VTG-200. And this is what's producing this signal on the screen right now. I have it hooked up to my trusty NEC flat panel display. It's an early flat panel, and I love it because it has this beige covering. So it matches when I have a beige computer up here, which I often do. This allows me to get a good signal out of it. It supports a lot of different rates and things, but it also just looks the part, right? If you're not familiar with Extron, Extron has made a lot and is still making a lot of different products. They've made all sorts of stuff. They make some especially good scan converters, and they have a box that takes VGA in, for example, and will output HDMI, and it does it really nicely, and it has lots of settings. There's just tons of different boxes. Well, this box is a programmable video test generator, and it supports a lot of different signals that it can output to different types of monitors. So let me just show you the list here. There's all sorts of things. It does everything from standard NTSC composite up through CGA and EGA, all the different VGA standards. It does funky monitors for like CAD work, like Sun monitors and things like that. It does Macintosh monitors. It will support even HDMI signals through a component connection all the way up to 1920 by 1080. And on top of all of that, there's a feature in here where you can program in your own video signal rates and things and then get that. So if you have a weird monitor that's not one of the standard ones that it supports, you can actually program in your own frequencies, et cetera, and as long as it's within the specs that the system can actually output, you could get that signal, some test patterns, up on that particular monitor to see if that monitor is working. So this is a perfect device. About the only thing that this does not do is it does not have RF output, and that's fine because you can always take the composite output, as long as it's working, and put that through a cheap RF modulator, and then you'll be able to output that to a TV. So with this one box, I can test almost anything from the 50s all the way up until modern day. Here's the top of the box, has some buttons and a screen, which we'll go into the details on that in just a little bit. There's nothing on the front, really. This is just a metal box, very sturdy, but it's just a metal box, no big deal. There's nothing on the sides, and it's got a bunch of ports on the back, which we'll go into more detail in a minute. But on the front here, there's 4 different buttons. There's an on-off button, a select switch, up and down arrows, and then there's a timer button and a sync button. And the mode switch in combination with the up and downs will let you select what type of monitor you're hooking up to, so it knows what type of signal to generate. Taking a look at the back here, you can see there are a lot of connections back here for connecting to various monitors that you might want to test, obviously. There's the power over here, standard power input, which is nice. And then just look at all these connectors. There's even I think this is a 13W3 connector here, which will attach to Sun and SGI monitors. Next monitors use this connection. Really nice to have that. There's a VGA connection. You would kind of expect that, but that's there as well. And then there's the Mac connection for connecting to Mac monitors. There's TTL for that CGA, EGA type of connection there. And then we have the analog outputs here with a composite output, red, green, blue, and then different syncs, horizontal sync, vertical sync. And you can also change there's a little toggle here where you can change the polarity of those syncs too, because some monitors need positive sync, some need negative sync, and so this will help you change that polarity of the sync. So with all of this, it really does support pretty much any vintage monitor that you want to connect to it. In just a minute, I'm going to test this thing out on 4 completely different types of monitors, but first, I want to thank the sponsor of this episode, PCBWay. PCBWay offers low-cost, high-quality PCB manufacturing and a whole lot more. They offer flexible and rigid-flexible PCBs. They offer surface mount assembly. They offer high-density PCBs with up to 60 layers. They offer aluminum PCBs, and they also offer custom metal and plastic parts that need to be CNC milled or 3D printed. So check out PCBWay for all your PCB manufacturing needs, and I thank them for their support of the Retro Hack Shack. I'm not going to have time to go over all the functions, but let me just show you basically how this works. So I've got my monitor connected, I've got the thing plugged in, I hit mode on, and it kind of gives me a little bit of a walkthrough here. First of it tells me what firmware I'm running and some other things, but then it kind of gives me a walkthrough of what this supports. What it's kind of like a mini tutorial on the screen. So I hold down mode, and then we can hit either the up or down rates. In this case, I'm looking for the VGA rate. It's got the super high res, CAD workstations, IBM Power PC, Mac, and Quadra. And here it is, VGA, VISA, and XGA scan rates. So I can let go of mode, and then I can go ahead and pick one of these. So this is what was up here before, XGA 6, which is 1024 by 768, 61 kilohertz refresh rate, horizontal refresh rate, and 76 hertz vertical refresh. So now that we have the one that we want to take a look at, we can hit select, and it should be outputting now. Okay, on the monitor, we should see, my eye cannot, oh yeah, there is a dot pattern here. Hopefully that's focused in on the camera. There is a little dot pattern. The dots are so small because it's at such a high resolution, it's very hard to see. But if I press the down arrow, now it will go into the various patterns that you can generate for these particular monitors. So here is a color with color shading pattern. And that's the one that I had up there before. There's one without the shading, which would be good if you had like a distortion on the bottom here or something like that. And then there's a grayscale pattern. There's a checkerboard pattern at different intensities so that you can set your brightness and contrast to get them just right. So there's like a low one, there's a medium one, and then there's a high output one. That's the high one. And then here's the color output, that just a plain color. This one's white. And by the way, the monitor is not calibrated for this particular resolution, which is why there's a black bar over here. Let's just go ahead and auto calibrate. All right, there we go. Auto adjust, and there we go. So now that's another nice thing about this monitor is if it's not filling the whole screen, it'll actually go back and do that for you, which is super nice. Okay, I hit the wrong button. Let's go back to the blank color. So now we have white on the screen, but I can go ahead. I think I can hold down mode and press up, and get different colors. So there's yellow, magenta, red, cyan, green, blue, and black. I love it. So that would really help you test your various colors if they were off. We've got a text display of black text on a white background with all H's across. And then of course we have the reverse of that, white text on a black background. Again, super helpful. We have this crosshatch pattern, which is great to try to help with either convergence, or if you've got beams that aren't aligning, or colors that are off, or pin cushioning going on a CRT, this would be super helpful. And then there's a bigger version of that. We also have these bounding boxes here, so you can test whether this should be perfectly centered. This one, I hope, is centered. In my eye, it's all wavy, but I think this is actually centered right now. And then you have without those extra lines on the edges, and this will help you test your focus on if it was a CRT, for example, but it would also let you see how detailed. So this has like a wider stripe, a narrower stripe, and then it's going even narrower, and then the narrowest, which is kind of like all the way across. So if you were having trouble with focus or sharpness, this will help you dial that in. And that's it. Then we're back to color. So those are all the patterns that come with this particular set. There's one more that you can do. In fact, you're not going to have this pattern if we go to test the composite output. It will actually have the SMPTE color pattern that you're probably used to on most CRT tests. One more really nice thing, I'm not sure if I pointed it out on the back, but there is a serial port in the corner of the unit back there, an RS-232 port. And that is there because you can also control this box with over serial connections. You can actually connect to it over serial and use a terminal, and you can change what pattern you're showing up on the screen here, or change other settings too. It's not too detailed, but if you really wanted to, you could build a remote changer with something like an ESP32, where you could actually send commands wirelessly through an ESP32 and change what's going on there if you wanted to. That might be something useful for the shack out here, actually. But you can also connect a Windows 95 PC and run this software. The programmers, when they went to program, they decided to support Windows 3.11, perhaps, but it definitely runs on this laptop, which is Windows 95. It would probably run on Windows 98 just fine. But some people have said that the software does not run on Windows XP. So just keep that in mind. So this is a wonderful laptop. I did a whole episode on this laptop a long, long time ago, back when I was on the real ping pong table inside the house. This is the HP OmniBook 800 CT. And it is a gem of a notebook computer. Super small, only about the size of a piece of letter-sized, US letter-sized paper, the whole thing, but it still has a really nice functional keyboard that's really nice to type on. And my favorite feature, which I showed in that video, is this button right here. And this button actually has a picture of a mouse on it. And yes, when you click on it, a mouse pops out the side of the laptop. Absolutely one of my favorite features of all time on any laptop. I absolutely love it. And yes, it does work. So the software lets you do a few things. It lets you save the scan rate table that's loaded in that. They refer to that as the firmware. I don't know if there's any actual firmware in here or if it's just the rate table, but it had firmware version 2.1, and then I was able to find the latest firmware version, which I believe is 2.3, and uploaded that using this tool into the unit, and it just uploads it right over the serial port. So we're connected to the unit here, and we can select a rate that we want to display and basically control most of the features, not all of them, but most of the features from this program. So let's say we wanted to know whether this monitor supported a 70 hertz refresh rate versus a 60 hertz refresh rate. We could actually, and let's say it was an old monitor and only supported 640 by 480. We could select, so let's start with 640 by 480, which is going to be at 60 hertz. And we'll select that and then say start VTG. And it should adjust. It did over here, and it's back to the dot pattern. So now this monitor has detected that and has changed its rate accordingly to 640 by 480. And if I click on the color bar pattern, there you go. You can see we've got the color bar pattern back, which is great. Now, if we wanted to say, okay, well, what does it support 640 by 400 though at 70 hertz? Let's see if the monitor will support that. I just selected in the menu, change VTG rate, and there it is. Let's see how far we can actually push this monitor. It's a lot easier to do that kind of work from the control software here because I don't have to go back and push all those buttons to find the rate that I want to test. I can just look for it here in the table and then select it. And I happen to know on this particular monitor, I think we can go all the way up to 1600 by 1200 at 70 hertz. Maybe it's 60 hertz. If we pull up this one, there we go. Now you can see this is the H character pattern test, and you can see just how small those H's are. I mean, I don't even know if you can make it out on if you're watching on a small screen, but it is actually displaying H's all the way across there. But anyway, that's the basics of how this thing works. But what's really cool about this is you can go back up to the top here and it says add a new rate. So if we click on that and say rate add, it'll bring up another window. And now we can go in and mess with all of the settings. Of course, there are limits. It doesn't tell us what the limits are. But if you tried to put in a number of pixels that it doesn't support or a number of lines that it doesn't support, it will actually tell you, this is out of range or whatever. But now I can actually go in and I can program all of these settings in, whether it's the sync, what kind of sync to have, sync on green or composite or whatever, the serration pulse, the polarity of the sync, for example, which port to output this particular signal on. So you can output it on TTL, analog, or the 13W3 port. So all of this, and then of course you can put your display text in here and it will actually show up on the little screen there. So once you've got this programmed, you could take this out in the field. If you had a special thing that you wanted to test, you could take this puppy out in the field. Your rate would still be saved in there, and then you could pull that up and test your monitor or TV or whatever you were testing with this out in the field. So really highly functional, really great testing device. Now, at the time of recording, there were only a few of these available on eBay, and I got them both. Not on purpose, but the first one I got was not outputting green and it was not outputting color on the NTSC channel. So I don't know if you can see it. It's back there in the back, right back here behind the monitor, and it's all apart right now because after I'm done making these videos, I'm going to be using this as a reference and hopefully fixing that one back there and making it available to for someone to use. This is actually the second unit that I bought. It went for about between $70 and $80 on eBay. I found a few on Facebook Marketplace that were even cheaper. The person on Facebook Marketplace wouldn't ship them, unfortunately. It would also came in a bag with a power connector, like a nice little carrying bag. And it also would have had a version of the software on floppy disk when it was brand new. Neither of the ones that I picked up that I bought came with that software. I had to find that online. Okay, let's go ahead, stop talking about this unit. I think I've told you most everything that I know about it without getting too boring. Let's go ahead and put the unit to the test and some of these monitors to the test and see if they work. All right, everybody, here we have the first monitor up for test on the Retro Hack Shack.
Here is the first item up for bids on our show.
And I will go ahead and, as always, I put chapter marks in the description which appear on the screen. So you can skip ahead to different chapters if there's a monitor you find that's interesting to you, or a monitor that's not so interesting to you. You can skip around, do whatever you want. But this is the first one we have today, and this is, of course, an Apple II monitor. This monitor was released after the Apple III. You probably would have seen it if you're of a certain age and had Apple IIs in the classroom for you to learn about computing. You probably would have been using a monitor just like this. It has the tilt mechanism here. So you're actually tilting the CRT inside the case. CRT is not attached to this outside part. It's attached to this darker kind of a brownish part here. And so you're actually tilting the actual CRT inside the case when you do this, instead of having a tilting stand on the bottom as would come out later on. And by the way, I'm going to be going through these monitors relatively quickly, not doing a lot of deep dive, opening them up, fixing them or anything. We just want to see if we can test them and then use the Extron VTG-200 to see what they look like. If they don't work at all, and I think I want to keep it and repair it, I'll mark it for repair later and come back and do a more detailed repair on it. Now, this one also came with a few notes. So we've got this one on the top here, which was left by Joe, and it says, Apple, am I sick? $5. I love it. Now, there's a reason why he actually wrote this, am I sick? But that also shows what I was saying about getting these monitors for $5. This is one of the $5 ones that I got. There's actually a second note, a much older note on here, and it's on the back of the monitor. So let me grab that. So this was also held on by tape. It says, "This monitor is flaky. Works sometimes. Sometimes letters get really small." So I kind of suspected right away what the problem was, or what the potential problems could be with this monitor, which is either a bad solder joint or a loose connection somewhere, because that would definitely cause sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's very common for these things to develop those kinds of problems. So even while I was at eWaste, I went ahead and plugged it in, and I gave it some really good whacks on the top and some really good whacks on the side. And sure enough, there was a small raster on it. And when I whacked it really hard, about 10 or 12 times, it actually gave me the full raster. So let's go ahead and just first turn it on and see what it's doing right now. Maybe it'll still be flaky. Maybe it'll be working after I beat the heck out of it. And yeah, there we are. So that's what it was doing, right? And there's more jitter that you guys can see on the video than I can see in real life. But yeah, this definitely has gone completely wonky, right? So it could also be a bad pot. It could be a pot that maybe has some corrosion on it or something, and it's stuck in an open position or at a weird resistance level or something like that. The vertical frequency might be off. But what I did when I was at eWaste was I just whacked it a couple times. So let's see if that works. Well, this does not seem to be doing anything, and the contrast pot over here is not actually doing a thing either. The brightness was turned down a bit, thank goodness, but it does get very bright if I turn it all the way up. So I think the CRT is actually in good shape, and there's just a problem with the connection. Let me go ahead and hook up the Extron. We'll see what happens, even though we know that we're not going to get a good picture because of the bad vertical deflection here. But let's just go ahead and turn this on. Now this, as I mentioned, this thing has profiles for a lot of different monitors. One of the monitors that it does support is an Apple II, which is a basic monochrome output signal. And you can do sync on green, which is going to help us to see a picture on the screen here. And it also supports actually Mac SEs and Mac Classics. It puts out a 22 kilohertz frequency. So if you wanted to, you could hook this up to the CRT on the analog board. Instead of having the video output come from the Mac motherboard, you could actually hook this up instead, and you could test as long as the analog board was working, you could actually test the CRTs in your Mac Classic or Mac SE or SE30. So, but for now, let's just go ahead and turn this thing on to the Apple II profile. Here we go, and I'll select it. And you'll notice no change right now because I haven't turned on sync on green. So this is a video signal, a monochrome video signal coming out of that green, but with no sync at all. So the monitor doesn't know what to do with it. But hopefully if we turn on sync, there we go. Now we can see the dot pattern. And of course this is, I wish this contrast was working. Maybe that's, it is working a little bit. It is working a little bit. But yeah, this thing is just so bright right now because it's not, the vertical isn't working. So I can turn the brightness down, and now we're just going to get the dots. Let's just go ahead and put it on the next pattern. And you can see this is the color pattern, different color patterns. Here's the grayscale pattern. Let's go to the one with the letters. There we go. That's the black letters on white background. Here's the white letters on black background, or in this case, green, because it's a green phosphor monitor. But this gives us a little bit of indication of what the actual text would look like if it was stretched out. And actually, this looks pretty good, I must say. So I think this monitor is in great shape. Probably it started having this problem and then it got relegated to a closet because it wasn't working. And finally, someone brought it into eWaste. So our first monitor of the day, Apple II, classic in so many ways, so nostalgic, and it does need a little bit of work. So we'll queue this up for a repair down the line. All right, well, here we go with monitor number 2 for today. And this is a Magnavox observation monitor. And it really caught my eye at eWaste because I noticed all these buttons on the front here and a bunch of connectors on the back that I'll talk about in a minute. But it's a 12-inch CRT. It didn't look like a TV necessarily. It looked a little bit more like a computer monitor. And when I got up close, I thought, well, let's just take it home and give it a try. Now this particular monitor had the cord cut off, unfortunately, already, but there was enough of it sticking out that I could go ahead and connect a temporary now, this is not going to be permanent, connection to a cord, just kind of with the pigtail that was sticking out there. I could solder on this cable, wrap it up with a little bit of electrical tape, and that's what we're going to use to test today. Hopefully the gauge of wire here is thick enough to support whatever draw this thing has, but I believe this is really 12 volts on the inside. I don't think it's going to draw a huge amount of current, so hopefully that particular cord should last at least for these tests. If not, it'll burn up and we'll have some fun in the shop. As you can see on the front, there are several connections here. There is a volume, a brightness, and contrast. There's also a button for VCR and auto, so we'll have to see what those do. And then there are these 4 inputs and a power button. And these correspond to the connections on the back. So on the back, it looks like there's a control for the frequency, the vertical frequency perhaps, and it says SEC, would that be C-cam? And then it says 4 to 60 for that pot back there. So I don't know if that adjusts the vertical frequency of this particular monitor between 4 and 60. That's kind of an interesting feature. And then there are 4 connections. And I'll take a look at the manual in a minute. You'll notice that they are not BNC connectors. So I'm going to have to figure out a way. I think I have one of these. I think they're European style connectors that were also used in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, back in this. Instead of using the coax with the screw in for things like composite, they use those, which are more convenient, but they don't quite match up with what we have here in the States. And then moving along, it's interesting. There's a looks like either a RF out or a composite out. I'm guessing that's a composite out next to a VHF in and a channel selector. So it's possible that you could watch TV on this thing. And there's also a couple more. They must have made several types of these sets with different features, because there's a couple more knockouts there that could be used to add in a different model, add more connections if needed. And then last but not least, we have a vertical hold and looks like a 12 volt input. If that knockout was, I don't know if you can use that or what, but looks like there's a 12 volt input back there that you could use for DC power as well. And that is center negative. So again, that kind of aligns with a lot of the Japanese electronics that were coming out at the time in the mid-80s. Speaking of mid-80s, I did find a sticker on the bottom of this thing. It has the manufacturer's date. So the manufacturer's date is July 1987. What were you doing in 1987? The model number of this set is the MC3510, if I didn't say it before. And this was, as it says on the cover, it's an observation monitor, aka for security cameras, and you can even see the whole system here. I found a picture of the manual. I couldn't find the actual digital copy, but I found a picture of it on eBay or something, and you can see there's our monitor right there, and there is the camera, which I believe was MC3511 was the model number of that. So they came kind of as a set, and it looks like you could hook up 4 of these cameras. So this would have been perfect for maybe a school or something like that, where they just needed a few security cameras around to make sure the kids weren't smoking in the bathroom, for example. I guess they wouldn't put a camera in the bathroom, but maybe smoking outside or anywhere in the school or something like that. I don't know. That's what I'm guessing. Or a small office, something like that. And then down here, we can see some more information about what the features are of this particular set. So it is black and white, a 12-inch black and white television monitor, black and white cameras with support brackets and mounts. So that definitely would have come like as a set. 57-foot coax cable, so now we know how this thing connected to those cameras. 3 male and 1 female Euro-type connectors. And it also looks like a TV antenna switch box, which would have allowed you to connect a TV signal, regular VHF TV signal up to this as well. Okay, so I'm going to test the RF, the VHF input first. And what I did was I have this set up to composite output, NTSC composite standard. That's going back through my Sony VCR, and then that is outputting through the coax into this on channel 3. So that button, I believe, is set for channel 3 in the back. First, we have to do a power on test because this is a momentary switch. I haven't applied any power to this yet, and I've got that janky cord there. So let's just first plug it in and see what happens. Make sure that nothing blows up. Here we go, plugging it in. Okay, no smoke. So that's a good sign. Go ahead and hit the power button and send some juice through the set. Well, the speakers work. And look at that. It's actually a pretty nice picture. Now, again, you're seeing the blanking information here. I'm not seeing that. I'm just seeing static. But yeah, it actually looks like a pretty nice black and white picture here. So let's see if we can get the... I'll hit the auto button and see what that does. Anything? Oh, okay. Well, oh, I see. So it's automatically rotating through. That's cool. It's rotating through the camera. So if you had this set up as on your desk, Mr. Security Man or whatever, vice principal at the high school.
Oh, Dad, you sounded like Dirty Harry just then.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Grace.
You would be seeing these actually rotate through all the different cameras, the 4 cameras. That's really cool. Let's turn that off if we can. Oh, it's not going to come out. If I hit that. Okay, we're back to VCR. Anything coming in, though, on that connection? Oh, I had the VCR set wrong. Hey, we are getting a signal. Nice. Oh, this actually looks pretty good. It's washed out right now. Let me see if I can get the brightness and contrast tuned in. There's quite some overscan here, but I don't think that's a big deal. It's actually looking pretty good. There's the convergence test. There's a little flicker. Seems like something's a little loose on the board or something, because there's a little flicker and we're getting some. It's almost like there's a wire loose or a bad solder joint or something. So there's definitely a little flicker. I can't tell whether these lines are straight or not. I think they are, but with my eyes the way they are, I can't tell if they're straight, but it doesn't look really wonky to me anyway. Adjusting the vertical hold, I can get rid of most of that flicker, I think. There we go. That's actually pretty good contrast here. And there's the SMTPE, but since this is a black and white set, obviously, we're not going to get anything. So let me see if I can hook up something to one of these. All right, well, I did hook this up briefly. I hooked the NTSC composite signal up briefly to one of those inputs, but it didn't do anything. It just gave me static like this. I could see a little bit of flickering going on as I changed the different patterns. So it was picking up something, but obviously the signal wasn't quite right. And I also had a thought that it's possible that this unit is actually sending power, maybe 12 volts, over those lines to power the cameras on the remote end. Those probably were not powered by a wall jack or something like that. They were probably powered at the same time as getting the video signal over that same coax connection. So I only tested it for a little bit and I took it out when I happened to think about that. And it doesn't look like I've done any damage or anything to the Extron. It must have some good protection on there, but yeah, all I really got when I tried to connect it to one of these video inputs here was just static. So I don't have the right signal coming from those cameras, but we can go to the TV. It's got a nice strong signal. I thought there'd be some burn-in on this thing, but maybe it wasn't used that much. But anyway, pretty cool to see that this thing is actually working. All right, we'll do a couple more monitors and then we'll probably have to call it a day. So I've got this Macintosh monitor, or technically it's an Apple. It doesn't even say Macintosh on the back, although that's what it was supposed to be used for. Apple monitor, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then I also have an Amiga monitor, which we can hook up and test. So that'll be fun. But first, let's take a look at this one. I haven't tested this yet. It's a Mac multiple scan, not multi-scan, multiple scan 15 display. And I think this is probably a bit more like a standard VGA monitor from at the time. I think there's a copyright date on the label, show that now. And I think this was produced either in 1992 or 1994. And it was meant to be sold with the Macintosh 2 LC 630 or Performa 630. I think those were basically the same system. So this would have been if you had an LC or a pizza box ones, the later pizza box style, because it is a multi-scan monitor. Sorry, Apple, it's not multiple scan, it's multi-scan. Because it is a multi-scan monitor, it's going to support several resolutions. I'll put those up on the screen maybe if I can find a bit more information. But because we have the Extron, we can actually test each one of those. One of the really nice things about having the Extron, I don't have a working LC630 to attach this to, and I know it'll work with other systems as well. But if you found a monitor like this, and especially if it was a rare monitor with a rare scan rate or something, and you wanted to test it, you could use this Extron to test it without actually having the system at your disposal to test the monitor, so you would know whether it was working or not. This particular monitor has similar controls that you might find on a VGA monitor from the 90s. It's got some controls down here to adjust the size, to move the picture around, to recalibrate. There's even a zoom feature. I'm not sure. I guess that maybe you can just zoom in and out of the image. If it doesn't fit the whole screen, you can zoom in on each dimension equally. I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, so it's got some controls here on the front, and that's basically it. It's got the Mac connector and power, and that's it. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and hit the power and make sure this is coming on. Oh, yep, it did. Came on. And I heard the DGAWs. I didn't necessarily hear high voltage, and there's no static on the screen, but I did hear the DGAWs, and we've got a light here. It could be that this monitor doesn't actually power up until it gets a signal. So let's go ahead and turn on the Extron and see if there is a signal outputting to this particular monitor. Okay, so I did find one of the rates in here that matches what the details on the website is, on the everymac.com website. One of the pre-programmed rates is 832 by 624 at 49.7 kilohertz and 75 hertz vertical. So this is one of the rates that's supposed to work on this thing. The other ones were a little bit off. We can test them out and see if they work, but I want to at least start with one that is the right specs for this monitor. So let's go ahead and turn it on. Oh, I heard high voltage turn on when it got a signal. Are we going to get a picture? Oh, there is brightness and contrast here too. Let's see if we can turn those up. Oh, wait a second. Yep, I see dots. I see dots. All right, I've got these turned all the way up. Let's go to the next one. There we go. There's the color. Cool. So yeah, this is totally working. Those colors look really good. All right, I adjusted the scan rate to save your eyeballs from all the flickering. This should be set for about 75. It's actually a little lower on my camera, about 74.4. And this is supposed to be outputting 75 hertz vertically, but 74.4 appears to be what this monitor is actually syncing up with the camera anyway. So hopefully this should look better. Let's go ahead and hit the recalibrate button and see what that does. Okay, very easily. Yeah, it just went ahead and got everything in the right proportion. What does this zoom button do? Oh. So maybe that, interesting. The zoom button does zoom things in just a little bit. Okay, so you can select, actually, we'll select the controls here. So like if this one, I think this is vertical size. Whoops. Yeah, vertical size. And if so you can adjust the vertical size up and down. You can adjust the horizontal, and then you can adjust the picture left and right and up and down. And let's see, if I just hit recall now, yeah, it goes back to the right size. So it can figure out where it's supposed to be at least and get the right picture. Very cool. So this monitor is not only working and looking great, but if I wanted to, because we don't have the pre-programmed matching frequencies that this thing supports, we could go into I could pull out my laptop and go into that program and add those profiles to this if I really wanted to. But for now, let's just test some of the ones that are a little bit off in terms of the refresh rate. So there's like, for example, 640 by 480, but the refresh rate is slightly different than the one that's listed as this monitor is supporting. Let's go ahead and output something like that and just see if this monitor can actually figure out what it's supposed to do. All right, so here's 640 by 480. Yep, I'm getting a dot pattern. There's the colors, not quite as bright as the other colors that directly match. And of course now we're getting the rolling, so I'm not going to go back and change the camera. We can see that it works. Let's try another resolution. Okay, this is 1024 by 768 at 60.2 kilohertz and 75 hertz vertical. And yeah, I couldn't see the dots, but it is apparently, hit that recalibrate. I mean, it is apparently working. Let's go up one more size and just test that real quick. Okay, this profile says it's for a 21-inch Mac. It's 1152 by 870 at 68.7 kilohertz horizontal and 75 hertz vertical. Let's see if this actually works. Oh, now I'm not going to do that. I got some weird whining when I tried to go up to that refresh rate. So we're not going to do that one. I don't want to actually hurt the monitor by sending a signal into it that it can't support. But yeah, the other ones actually work. This looks like a very good quality monitor. The only problem I can see with it is it's got a painted front and a yellowed plastic back. So I'm sure this all matched at one point when it was new, but now the back is yellowed and the front looks to be painted. So they do not match anymore, but I am going to mark this monitor working perfectly. Okay, well, I have saved the best for last. What we have here is a Commodore Amiga 1080 monitor. So this actually has a manufacture date on the back of January 1986. So very early in the Amiga history. And it's a really great monitor if you can pick one up. I think all of these are highly sought after. This is a 1080, of course, the 1084 and the various versions. 1084S is what I have over there, I think. A 1084S, and I've got a couple other ones around that I might test in part 2. So you're going to have to come back and see that. But I thought we would end up with a real doozy here. Commodore Amiga 1080 that I picked up at eWaste for $5. Is it going to work? One of the nice things about this monitor is it has the flap here. It's actually intact. So I'll have to be careful with this so it doesn't break off. But often on the 1084Ss, in fact, I think if you can see back there, I'm missing the flap on mine back there. They often fall off and they're kind of hard to replace. So this one has the flap, has all the controls down here to switch signals and adjust the monitor and everything. And then on the back, it has connections for composite. It has a chroma input. So I think this does like chroma luma signal input perhaps. And then also it has a digital TTL connection, and this will support the composite and the digital TTL. And if I really wanted to, we could do analog RGB as well through the analog outputs. But since that would be complicated to hook up a special connection, I'm just using the digital TTL out because I haven't tested that yet. So let's go ahead, hit the power button. Okay. I heard high voltage. Yep. Got static on the screen. So far so good. Of course, there's no picture right now. Let me see what this button is set for here. Yeah, and indeed it is set for composite, and then the middle has a three-way switch. So it's composite, and then there's, I think, separated SEP. So that would be separated chroma luma signals on the back, and then there is RGB. So I believe it's set for composite right now. So if we turn on composite, we should get a picture on the screen. Let's try it. Let's go to the Extron VTG-200. Let's try NTC non-interlaced. I think this supports a non-interlaced signal. Let's see what happens. Oh, getting a dot pattern. This is actually looking good. Oh, and look at those colors. Now they look a little bit washed out. Again, this is the non-interlaced. Looks like there may be some capacitors that need to be changed here because I'm seeing some fringing here in between the colors. Maybe you can see that as well. Let me adjust the refresh rate of the camera so that you don't have that crawling thing going across there. There we go. Hopefully that should look better. So there is definitely some overscan going on, but yeah, this is all set to the middle settings now, and it looks pretty good on the camera. So this monitor probably needs some recapping work, but otherwise functionally it looks pretty good. So let's switch over to TTL and see if we're actually getting good TTL signal, and see what that looks like. There we go. Ooh. Now this is set for EGA. Looks like it doesn't like this. It's almost like it's not getting a good sync. Let's try a different one. Okay, there we go. This is CGA mode now, and it looks like it supports that pretty good. We've got some nice, clear, bright dots, and you can see the picture is not edge to edge. It's actually cut off like you would expect a CGA image to be, with a border around it. And there's our colors. Wow, that looks really good. Nice colors in CGA mode. Really nice. I know they probably look washed out to you, but they are not washed out in person. Especially with everything at the default. Usually with these monitors, you have to turn things up a bit because the CRTs have worn out a bit over time. The capacitors have, are kind of degraded and things like that, and everything's just kind of dim. But actually in this CGA mode, this looks really, really good. Got our checkerboard pattern. Here's the different colors. So here's where we could check for purity. I think if I hold down mode and hit up, yeah, there we go. So there's yellow, magenta, red, cyan, green, blue, and black. So that is looking really good. We can check out our characters here. Looking good, looking great, nice and sharp. There's our convergence. Also, I think looking good. I don't know. It's all wavy to me right now with my eyes, but I think it's okay. And yeah, picture. So we could actually tune that. There we go. Kind of into the middle of the screen. And I'm assuming there's a vertical adjustment too. So if we wanted to run in this mode, we could probably center that thing up. But yeah, looking good. And look at those contrast. Look at the lines. You can see them all the way down here. Very sharp. So there we go. So the Amiga is working in both NTSC mode and it's working in CGA color mode, RGB, digital RGB mode. So that is really cool. I mean, if I got this monitor and I had to go pull out the Amiga 2000 over there to test it, I don't know if I would. It's just a lot of work. I got to go over there. I got to drag that thing out and get it hooked up and hope that it doesn't have a problem and then hook it up to the monitor and then test the monitor. You know, it's really nice just to have a simple option like this where I can actually just hook this up, test the monitor, make sure it's working, and then move on to something else. Mark it good, mark it bad, mark it in need of repair, whatever. So far, this one looks like it needs some caps. That first one that we tested definitely has probably a broken solder joint on it or a wire or something that's come loose or maybe an open cap or something. But I know that when I had it in e-waste, that first one, and I banged on it a couple of times really hard, it did come back. I got the full raster. So that one can be a future repair video. And the rest of these just look freaking great, guys. So I'm really happy with this Extron. Just keep in mind that they are getting old. They were released in 2002. I've got a good one now, and I've got a bad one back there that I hope to fix. Your mileage may vary on these, so just keep that in mind. They're getting old. Might need new caps, might have chips that need to be replaced, and those chips are not marked in that thing. They actually scrubbed off all the names of the chips, unfortunately, so that people couldn't duplicate their work, protecting their IP. So if they're bad, they're bad. You take your chances. The good news is it was only $70. So $75, that's probably worth a risk, especially if you're someone like me that tests so many monitors so often. So hey, if you are interested in monitors or anything else or any other eWaste Wednesday episodes, I'm going to put a video right over here in the corner for you, up here, down here, a playlist, a video that YouTube thinks is best for you. You can go watch that, and I'll see you in that video next. Thanks, everybody.
End of line.